I would never hit a woman, but my wife's lover looks, acts, dresses like a man, wants to be called he, him, demands to be treated as a man, but unfortunately she was a woman. So in the spirit of inclusiveness, I beat him up like the man he claims to be. My wife Kate and I met at Disneyland on a beautiful summer day, when we shared a bench seat on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. I grew up in an ultra-religious family, and I led a sheltered life when it came to women. Because of the hot weather, Kate wore a very revealing tank top and tiny shorts, which immediately piqued my interest and drove me insane. I had never been this close to a woman who got me so excited. We were both college students. She attended UCLA, and I was a student at USC. She was a brunette with long hair. She was a sophomore and I was a senior. We hit it off and toured the rest of the park together, along with her friends and mine. It took me less than 2 minutes to fall hopelessly in love with her. She was the first girl I had ever felt this strongly about. She was impressed that I was a summer intern at a famous and wildly profitable investment banking company with a job offer upon my graduation, and a 6-figure salary plus bonus. Her friend Judy, a blonde with very short hair, seemed a little too clingy and protective of Kate, but I ignored it. My cousin Eric tried to make time with Judy, but she had no interest in him or my other friends. Kate and I dated for 1 year before we married. Neither Kate's family or mine had money, but as a finance major I had the potential to earn a lot of money. That impressed Kate, and she bragged about that to her friends and family. After I graduated I became an investment banker and made a fortune. Before we married I bought a house. I may have been in love, but this was California and I was guided by my recently divorced manager to keep the house in my name only. Kate loved all the jewelry and luxuries I willingly bought her. I think she loved her BMW at least as much as she loved me. We held our wedding at Disneyland, which cost me a fortune. My insanely religious parents refused to attend because in their insane minds Disneyland was satanic. Kate was dressed as Snow White. I dressed as Prince Charming. We really did look like we just walked out of the fairy tale. Judy was her maid of honor. Based on the mean looks she kept giving me, I guess she should have been dressed as the evil stepmother. If I had a poisoned apple I would gladly have given it to her. Eric was my best man. He was also dressed like a royal prince. Eric and I were cousins who looked a lot alike. We had been best friends since 1st grade. When we were in 4th grade, neither of us were big or strong and a 6th grade boy named Luke kept picking on us. Alone we were weak victims, but together we overpowered and beat the shit out of Luke. That taught us a powerful lesson that working together we were not twice as strong as one of us alone, but many times stronger. Eric and I always had each other's backs. When he thought that his slightly chubby girlfriend who kept disappearing was cheating on him in college, I surreptitiously followed her for a few days and learned that she wasn't seeing another boy, but was secretly attending Weight Watcher meetings. I thought my marriage was good, but several times a year my school teacher wife would visit her friend Judy in Philadelphia. Each time after she returned home, she started a fight claiming that Judy said I didn't deserve her. I worked too many hours because according to Judy all I cared about was making money. And I responded, Kate, all you care about is spending all the money I make. Do you want me to stop and teach school instead at 20% of my current salary? Kate didn't answer but walked away in a huff. My favorite of Judy's insults was that as a banker, I was part of the patriarchal conspiracy designed to dominate and subjugate women. The woman was bonkers. I tried to explain to her that the job of banks was to subjugate everyone equally regardless of sex or race. Almost every disagreement or argument Kate and I ever had begun with the phrase, Judy says. Judy called my BMW a pathetic attempt to show off and make up for my alleged sexual shortcomings. I asked what Kate's BMW signified. Once, I gave Kate an ultimatum to choose either Judy or me. She dared me to go through with that threat and to my shame I backed down. She wanted to invite Judy to our house, but then I did draw the line and said that would end our marriage. Kate reluctantly relented. Judy phoned me that night and called me a chauvinist to all who didn't deserve Kate. She claimed that with her help, Kate would soon wake up, reject me and move on to fulfill her lifelong manifest destiny. I'll never understand what she sees in you. Judy was a school teacher and wasn't rich. She believed that anyone who earned more than $75,000 a year was a capitalist swine who deserved to be killed and would be after the revolution. I worked as an investment banker and made bank. Maybe that's what Kate saw in me. Maybe that's all that she saw in me. Sometimes Kate was very passionate with me in bed, and sometimes she just phoned it in. It didn't matter what I did or didn't do. It just depended on what mood she was in. One night, we watched the Miss Universe contest on TV. I certainly enjoyed watching a bunch of beautiful women in bathing suits and was really excited. After the show, my wife almost killed me with passion. A half hour after I collapsed in exhaustion, Judy phoned my wife, and I thought I heard them speaking about the various beauty queen contestants. I probably misheard, but I thought they said one was named Butch and another Lipstick. The time and subject of the conversation struck me as very weird. I decided that I had to keep my ears open and learn more. Something I didn't understand was going on, but I resolved to find out what it was. Looking back now, it was obvious, but at the time I was clueless. I suppose I was blinded by a combination of love and naivete. I grew up in a Bible-thumping household where sex was never ever discussed and the internet forbidden. My parents never forgave me for attending USC and not some obscure Bible college. I hadn't even kissed a girl until I was in college, and as embarrassing as it is to say, I was taught that using my tongue while kissing a girl was a mortal sin. Kate was the first and only girl I ever French kissed, and then only after we were engaged. However, I was a quick study and devoted myself to learning how to please my wife. I thought I was pretty good at it. Kate never complained, but since she was the only woman I ever slept with, I had no basis for comparison. Kate said that I was the only boy she'd ever slept with, and I believed her. In my quest to learn just what the hell was going on, I installed a tape recorder on the telephone, plugged into a jack in the garage. I also installed several voice-activated recorders throughout the house. While waiting for the results, I just needed to get a way to clear my head and think through my problem, as well as give Kate an opportunity to hang herself with her words. There's no better way for me to clear my head than to take a very long motorcycle ride to Arizona, while the phone tap and microphones should record anything I needed to know. When you drive a car across the country, it's like watching a movie. When you make that same trip on a motorcycle, it's like being in the movie. Tony Hillerman writes novels about a Navajo-American Indian detective in Arizona, and I love them. I drove my super-fast VMAX motorcycle through the towns and areas about which he writes, Shiprock, Four Corners, and Mexican Waters, where I stopped for gas. As they say, a Yamaha VMAX can pass anything on the road except a gas station. I was in the middle of an arid desert. The sky was pure blue, without the hint of a cloud in sight. I parked at a gas pump next to a pickup truck. An elderly Native American man sat upright in the truck bed. He looked to be at least 200 years old based on the deep lines and wrinkles on his face. As he began speaking to me, the rest of the family left the store and gathered around us. He asked me where I was headed. About 300 miles from here to Sedona, I answered. He furrowed his brow, cupped one hand behind an ear, and faced upward towards the cloudless sky. It will rain tonight in Sedona, he pronounced with the authority of a weather wizard. His family averted their eyes from me and looked down at the ground. I was gobsmacked. You can predict the weather 300 miles away by watching and listening to the sky? I asked incredulously. No, he replied, from watching and listening to CNN this morning. At that point, he and his whole family burst into laughter at the dumb guy. This guy was a regular Indian Jerry Seinfeld. Then his face shifted and he became serious and touched my arm. I can see that your soul is troubled. When you arrive in Sedona, find a hotel near an energy vortex. When you sleep, you may discover the vision quest that you desperately seek and need. I was expecting a punchline, but there was none. Now I'm being serious, he said as he shook my hand, and I told him how much I enjoyed our conversation, and then I continued my way. When I arrived in Sedona just before the rain, I used my iPhone to learn what a vortex was. It was like a cosmic magnifying glass for a sort of metaphysical energy that is focused on the ground at the vortex. People traveled from all over the world to Sedona for the mystical visions they experienced from the vortex. I checked into a low-cost motel that the guidebook said was on a vortex. I felt foolish and expected nothing unusual or mystical to happen. Though my Indian friend seemed sincere, he might still have been putting me on. I was exhausted from the long ride and soon fell asleep to the sound of the raindrops that the old man had predicted. Or at least I think I was asleep. I had a dream, but it was too real to be a dream. I guess maybe it was a vision. I saw my wife Kate on our king-size bed, but I wasn't on top of her. Her girlfriend Judy was. Judy asked her if she gives her more pleasure than her husband. Kate just moaned in agreement and the vision stopped. I woke up crying because I believed this vision was real, too real. Was this vision from the vortex or from my subconscious mind trying to warn me? Maybe it was both. I didn't know, but I did believe it told me a bitter, painful truth that I had been trying to avoid and had previously run away from. The experience shook me to my core. When I returned home, I listened to the phone and voice recordings and learned to my horror that my vision was true. Kate and Judy had been lovers since junior high school. I looked up butch and lipstick in the dictionary and learned what that meant. That explained to me that Judy was a butch, or masculine, and Kate was a lipstick or femme. I was crushed. I loved Kate with all my heart, and now I knew that my love was never reciprocated. All this time she had played me for a fool. I needed revenge. I planned on riding my motorcycle to Kate's brother's wedding in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They planned on using my absence for a week-long estrogen-fueled love fest in our bed. Judy bragged that if I returned home unexpectedly, she would beat the shit out of me. Judy informed Kate that she had been taking kickboxing lessons and looked forward to trying out her new boxing skills on my face, with a special emphasis on kicking me between my legs so I could never again have intimacy with Kate. She wanted Kate to belong to her only and exclusively. She planned on staying around after I returned from the wedding and beating the tar out of me while she wore a mask. I thought that was a great idea and adopted it as my own. Only I wasn't the one who would be the punching bag. Kate explained to Judy that I made a fortune, and she wouldn't give up all that money. I was so furious that I could barely control my rage. I would make them pay, but I needed a plan. Judy's plan. The first part was to leave no evidence that I knew the truth of Kate's relationship with Judy, so I threw away the tape and voice recorders. I would leave for and attend the wedding, but with a maniacal twist. As I finished packing the saddlebags on my Yamaha 120 horsepower VMAX motorcycle, my wife Kate implored me to drive carefully. It was 5 a.m. and I was supposed to ride from Los Angeles to Albuquerque, New Mexico to my wife's brother's wedding. My wife will fly there in a few days. I took one last look at what had been our home for 2 years, mounted the bike and took Pacific Coast Highway south for just a few miles to Route I-10 and headed west for just a few miles. I exited near a McDonald's. I parked the bike on the street away from any cameras and ordered some food. I waited for my cousin Eric. I handed him my motorcycle jacket, helmet, iPhone and the keys to my motorcycle. He drove off into the distance. If someone checked the location of my iPhone, it would show me many miles from here. After drinking enough coffee to keep an elephant awake and jittery all night, I entered the junker car that I had purchased a week before with cash in preparation for my plan. It wasn't registered to me and couldn't be traced back to me. I returned to my home and parked a block away. My wife was home alone awaiting her lover, Judy. She had no idea that I knew about her affair with Judy. She had scheduled Judy's visit to coincide with my trip. Kate had been acting strangely ever since I announced my plans for another epic motorcycle journey a month before when we received the wedding invitation. Judy was my age, my height, but weighed a lot more than I did. Judy's plane would land in a few hours, and she would no doubt take a cab headed towards my home. I would never hit a woman, but if a woman decided to act like a man, dress like a man, and demand to be addressed as he or him, and treated no differently than I man, then I had no problem beating him as a man, especially since she planned on fighting me like a man. My seething vengeance was equal opportunity and non-discriminatory. Maybe I'll win some kind of woke award for my attitude. At 8 a.m., Judy exited the cab at the foot of our 100 feet long steep driveway. The cab left and dressed all in black with a mask. Like a ninja, I stepped out from the overgrown bush and punched Judy as hard as I could in her face. Then when she was on the ground with blood spurting from her nose, I kicked her several times hard between her legs, then stomped on and broke the fingers on her hands. Judy cried out in pain. So much for her kickboxing lessons. Finally, I poured a container of indelible black ink on her face, and I quickly left, walked to my burner car and drove off. Though I felt a lot better, I was not done messing with Judy and Kate. This was just the first installment in payback for them treating me like an idiot and breaking my heart. I met up with Eric about 100 miles west at the Cabazon Indian Casino near Palm Springs. We didn't acknowledge each other while under the prying eyes of the security cameras. Eric had been there for over 2 hours enjoying some gambling with my credit card, while wearing a face mask and dressed in my motorcycle jacket. Separately, we walked into a bathroom devoid of security cameras and exchanged clothes. He had won about $200 and tried to split it with me, but I refused. I gave him my car keys and he handed me back my jacket, bike keys and iPhone. I continued on my way east. That night I stopped in Tempe, Arizona. As I checked into a cheap motel, I saw a dozen messages on my iPhone. One was from the Santa Monica police. I returned that call. They asked me for my current location and my whereabouts at 8 a.m. I asked why. They said there was a hit-and-run accident and someone identified my motorcycle. I explained that I was at the Cabazon Casino gambling at that hour. I declined their suggestion that I return for questioning. I explained that I had a lot of miles to go for the wedding, but I would see them when I returned in about a week. The rest of my trip to New Mexico went smoothly except for a run-in with a would-be armed robber and emaciated, probable meth addict in Tucson, Arizona. I had been on the bike for hours and desperately needed to pee. I parked at a gas station with my Kevlar line jacket zipped tight. I had to go so badly that I didn't even tip up the face mask on my helmet or remove my gloves. The short, skinny guy with long, stringy red hair put a knife to my stomach and demanded my wallet. I wasn't thinking like a tough guy, but as a guy who didn't want to ruin a pair of $1,000 Kevlar-lined motorcycle pants with urine, I knew that his knife wouldn't penetrate my jacket or helmet, so I pushed him aside and ran to the restroom. When I returned to my bike, the guy with the knife looked at me with awe, impressed by my bravery. He said that if I was with him, we could knock off the gas station. It took a moment for me to comprehend his offer. I ignored him, started my bike and drove away. Like I said, when you're traveling by motorcycle, you're in the movie. The rest of the trip was fun until I met up with my wife at the hotel for the wedding. She screamed at me for beating up Judy. I didn't answer her. She claimed I ruined their time together. I commented that I didn't know that Judy was coming to our house despite me forbidding it. I told her that made me angry because she lied to me. Since Judy's face was covered in black ink, they couldn't go anywhere, and the kick to Judy's groin coupled with her broken fingers in a cast caused her enormous pain during the entire visit. I made no mention that Judy's fingers could no longer pleasure my wife. Her broken nose probably also prevented her kissing her effectively because of the pain. I said nothing in my defense, except to ask what motive I might have for harming Judy. My wife refused to answer me. With Kate's crotch bruised so badly, she couldn't have received any carnal comfort from Kate. How frustrating for them. It took a mountain of willpower for me not to laugh in her face. 2 days after the wedding, I began my two-wheel journey home. When I returned home, I learned that the Santa Monica police had subpoenaed my cell phone records, as well as my credit card bills for that day. The bills showed that I purchased gas at 2 different stations many miles away from my home an hour before the attack and ate breakfast at the casino, over 100 miles away, at the time of the attack. They also had surveillance footage of the casino which showed someone wearing my jacket and a face mask, who was my size and had my same colored hair, exiting my motorcycle in the parking lot and entering the casino. My cell phone records indicated I made several phone calls from the casino around the time of the attack. That was the last I heard from the police. I had no known motive and no opportunity based on my electronic footprint. My wife tried to make nice to me after we returned from the wedding. I watched as she gazed at our nice house and her expensive car. I think she was afraid of losing them, which was prophetic. I waited a month and filed for divorce. She begged me to reconsider, but I refused. I never let on that I knew about her relationship with Judy. I merely said that I no longer loved her because I was angry that she snuck Judy into our home during my absence. To my wife's horror and surprise, a 2-year marriage does not merit a lifetime of alimony. I paid her not insignificant legal fees just to be quickly rid of her. My company is filled with beautiful, ambitious women who buy and sell stocks after assessing their intrinsic value. It seemed that my value went up dramatically because I was pursued by so many women at work that I felt like a fish on the first day of base season. as each of these women tried to lure me, hook me, and reel me in. I'm not ready to have another permanent relationship right now, but I've spent several exciting weekends with several different women. Kate moved to Philadelphia and to Judy. A year later I learned through mutual friends that they broke up when Judy caught Kate in a motel bed with, heaven forbid, a man. I wasn't surprised. I had paid a handsome male model, handsomely, pardon the pun, to seduce Kate. Simultaneously Judy received an anonymous text message telling her where and when Kate was cheating on her. Though I carried out the plan, I can't take credit for the idea, it was Eric's. I really enjoyed the revenge, especially when Kate phoned me and asked if I could forgive her little mistake and we could try to renew our relationship. She claimed that she now had a better understanding of her sexuality. She would learn to control her occasional need to be intimate with a woman. She said she missed me. Oh, I said, you mean my credit cards, then I hung up. Once again I followed Eric's advice and phoned Judy telling her that Kate wanted to come back to me. I don't want her, you can have her, but I don't think she wants you anymore. Then I sang the chorus of a Leslie Gore song. It's Judy's turn to cry. Now for the second story. I'm Bill, I own and run a men's clothing store. It's boring. I wish that instead of selling clothes that I was a cowboy. I've always been obsessed with cowboy moves and the cowboy life, though I'd never even ridden a horse or fired a gun. I have never started a fight or done anything remotely dangerous or unconventional, which is why my childhood friends from Morgan Hill, California, where we grew up, sarcastically burdened me with the nickname and rhyme. Wild Bill from Morgan Hill never took a chance and never will. I met my wife, Jane, at a night school class on novel writing at UCLA. Pretty soon we were dating and in love. Jane wasn't the smartest woman on earth, but the sweetest. She was easily fooled by every salesman trying to sell her something. Soon we referred to ourselves as Wild Bill and Calamity Jane. She was obsessed with writing the great American literary novel that only a few intellectuals would understand. I wanted to write a popular trashy murder mystery set in the Old West that millions would buy. I thought her writing style was pretentious, but I never told her that. She felt that my writing style was trashy, derivative, and like every show on TV, she often told me that. I never let on how much that hurt my feelings. We wrote for years, but neither of us sold anything. Eventually we both gave up writing when our children were born. I'll be honest with you, it broke her heart and mine to be failed writers. Two women with whom we took classes did successfully sell novels. One was married to a literary editor at a major publishing company, the other to a very powerful literary agent. Selling a novel is easy if you're intimate with the right person. After 20 years of marriage, I felt that my wife Jane had been drifting away from our preschooler, 2 high school-aged sons and me for the past 6 months since Christmas. Once the kids were on summer break, I arranged a family vacation to get closer to my wife. The 2 weeks that Jane, our 3 kids, and I spent at a working dude ranch in Wyoming were the most fun I've ever had in my life. I learned how to ride a horse, lasso calves, flip them over and tie their hooves together. On the last night of our vacation, I competed in a mini rodeo and won a gold ribbon for using a lasso. The ranch owner said I had finally earned the nickname, Wild Bill, after Wild Bill Hitchcock. I think I was born in the wrong era. I should have been a cowboy. I had the hardest time convincing my wife to take time away from her job as a medical secretary for Dr. Waldo to go to the ranch. Every time I tried to get close to her at the ranch, she pushed me away and called her office. This happened every day, sometimes several times a day. He can survive without you, I chided her. Her look told me I was wrong. It told me that she couldn't survive a day without talking to Dr. Waldo. She also gained a lot of what she called weight. Lost pills. I didn't know why. She seemed a lot thinner than usual. That was my first inkling of trouble in paradise. She began working for him around Christmas time, and for the next month he was all she spoke about. He was brilliant. He was empathic, and most importantly, he was rich. I met him once. He was younger than my wife and me, and he was very handsome. He was also married. If my wife would have started working late or claiming to go out for drinks with the girls, I would have hired a private eye. But that never happened. So, I did some snooping. Myself. The first and easiest clue I found was in her underwear drawer. I saw a lot of provocative lingerie that my wife never wore for me. Our sex lives haven't changed recently. Once our youngest was born 5 years ago, my wife lost all interest in sex, at least with me. Once. However, she did get so excited that she dropped the TV's remote control. We had so much fun at the Dude Ranch that my 2 older sons and I joined an equestrian club and rode horses on most Sundays along a combination bridle and jogging path in LA's Griffith Park. We continued practicing our roping skills from the saddle on various fence posts with the lariats that we kept on the saddle's horns as we rode by the posts at a full gallop. It's hard to find cattle to lasso in Griffith Park, even next to the Gene Autry Museum. My wife rarely joined us. One time she did join us, and I discovered that her doctor or employer jogged alone along the same path. We stopped our horses to say hello to him and then kept riding. I thought running into him was a suspicious coincidence. I didn't use a private eye to spy on my wife, I used a detective dad, my widower father. He staked out the doctor's office from the time my wife arrived until she left. Jane and the doctor never left during work hours, then after work returned to their homes. If something was going on, it happened while they were at work. The office was closed from 12 noon to 1:30 in the afternoon for lunch, and maybe for an affair. One day I asked to accompany my wife to work. I told her I was curious about her office. She reluctantly agreed to give me the grand tour. I met with the doctor, who I believe smirked at me as he told him how invaluable my wife was to his practice. While the examination rooms all contained examination chairs that weren't suited for lovemaking, the doctor's private office held a couch that would make a great love nest. I hid a Wi-Fi-enabled microphone behind a plant on a shelf above the couch. My wife kept a list of all her passwords on a piece of paper in our nightstand, so getting into her office Wi-Fi was a snap. I spent my lunch hour for the next 2 days parked in the doctor's office parking lot listening to confidential medical consolations between the doctor and his patients. At first I ignored these meetings, they weren't what I was interested in. Then, however, to my surprise, I noticed a pattern. The doctor had my wife fill out a prescription for each patient. She gave a prescription for Oxy to every single patient who came in. This wasn't a medical practice. It was a front for selling narcotics. The doctor was shrewd. He never said the word Oxy out loud. The next day's news broke my heart. My wife took some cannabis gummies, followed by some unknown pills, and the doctor took Viagra as they had sex during their lunch break. They discussed leaving their spouses when the school year ended and her kids would be out of school. She was afraid that leaving her family during the school year would harm their grades and chances to get into college. My kids were good but not great students. They wanted to enroll in Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo because they had a rodeo team. My wife's plan was to declare all-out war on me in the divorce and take me for every sin I had and leave me without a dime. I never did anything to her to deserve this sort of treatment. I had no wish to reconcile with my wife because she was no longer the woman I fell in love with and married. It was like some science fiction movie where aliens took over her mind and body. I sought revenge on both of them. I didn't want to kill them. I knew that if we divorced under normal circumstances, I would pay alimony, child support, and lose my house and children. I decided to follow my wife's example. I would give no quarter and show no mercy. My plan of action would destroy my wife and probably harm my children in the short run. But what choice did I have? I went to the local police station and spoke with a detective from the narcotics squad. I laid out all of the information about Dr. Feelgood Waldo and my wife's complicity in his drug business. My illegal recordings weren't enough probable cause to obtain a search warrant. But based on my evidence, the police sent an informant to the office. He was sold drugs without an examination. My wife wrote out the prescription. He came back a week later with a friend and both left with drugs. After a few more drug buys, the police obtained a search warrant and 6 police officers raided the doc office where they arrested the doctor and my wife. A few hours later she phoned me in tears, begging me to bail her out of jail. Lately she had trouble with her hearing and now she could barely hear me on the phone. I guess it was because of her crying. She never said why she was arrested and I didn't ask. I never showed up to bail her out. I had her served with divorce papers while she was in jail. A few days later the police took me aside, sat me down and in a somber tone informed me that my wife was addicted to Oxy, which also had a terrible effect on her hearing. That gave me another reason to hate Dr. Waldo. He got her addicted so she became his slave. That also explained all the alleged diet pills she took at the Dude Ranch. I assumed that Dr. Waldo would go away for 20 years. I was so naive. The last time I saw my wife was at her trial. I sat in the audience smiling at her while she was fashionably dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit. She looked at me and broke down in tears. I could barely fight the urge to comfort her. Once again my wife tore my heart out, but I didn't weaken and run over to her. Hell, I would have been arrested if I had tried. The doctor claimed that he hadn't given anyone prescriptions for Oxy. He claimed that my wife did it on her own for her own profit. The DA made him a deal. He testified against my wife, who received a 10-year prison term, and he was sentenced to his time already served and 100 hours of community service. He didn't even lose his medical license. My wife was marched off too. Prison, and her lover walked out of court a free man. The doctor waited until no one was looking, and he laughed at me and gave me the finger. I couldn't fathom this gross miscarriage of justice. I was furious. I wanted to run across the courtroom and strangle him. None of this made any sense to me until later, when the narcotics detective who organized the takedown told me the truth. He was even angrier than I was when the doctor skated. He told me that the doctor's father and one of his uncles were judges. His mother's father was a major political kingmaker. His family had so much political power that he was untouchable. The detective had been warned by his captain not to go public with this information. None of this appeared on TV or in newspapers. He was painted as the innocent dupe to my scheming drug addict wife. If I wanted any justice, it would have to be vigilante justice. Of course, with my wife in prison, the divorce was a cakewalk. Some part of me, the dumb part, still loved her and needed to exact revenge on the doctor for ruining my marriage and my wife's life. I don't know if you could call it my need for revenge or my need for justice, but I had to right the scales of justice against the doctor, but I didn't know how. Sometimes fate gives us the answer, but we must pay attention to identify it. The next month, after 2 straight weeks of rain, I hadn't been able to ride my horse. I had been cooped up all this time, and I really needed to get outside and ride. I waited until one overcast day between rainstorms, and I saddled up and rode along the bridle path alone, where I saw the doctor jogging. I retrieved my lariat from the saddle and pulled my neckerchief up as a mask. I disguised my voice and repeated Val Kilmer's immortal last words to Johnny Ringo from the cowboy movie Tombstone as I lassoed Dr. Waldo around his middle and started galloping away. Of course he fell, and I dragged the doctor through the mud for several hundred feet and stopped. I thought he had suffered enough. He wasn't conscious. Unfortunately, his head had hit a large rock which crushed his skull, killing him, though I hadn't planned for that. It brought a smile to my lips. Then my self-preservation instinct kicked in. I thought of all the murder mysteries I'd read or written and somehow knew what to do. I pulled his body another 50 feet to a gate for the Los Angeles River. I removed my lasso from his bloody, now lifeless body, then I removed his wallet and watch. I would later throw them away so it might look like he was robbed. Then I remembered from a Coast Guard class.